Chapter 1236, Linkage. In the eyes of Shaman King Klarman, a bright silver moon rose, quickly filling his irises. This was completely different from the normal crimson moon. It also wasn't the blood moon that occasionally appeared. It was similar to the abnormal state of the moon from not too long ago, but there were also certain differences. It illuminated Klarman's eyes and body, causing him to instantly lose contact with the crimson moon. That also meant that, before things went back to normal, Klarman could no longer attempt moonlight transformation, nor could he teleport within the range of the crimson moonlight's illumination. Suddenly, a word appeared in the mind of this shaman king of the moon domain. Lilith. The ancient goddess Lilith, who once controlled the moon pathway. Such a change was out of Imlin's expectations, but Sharon, who was good at controlling her emotions and thoughts, wasn't affected. Despite having become a Klarman puppet, she raised her right hand and yanked some of her messy, blackened white hair. Almost at the same time, on the shaman king's head, a tuft of white hair fell on its own without him suffering any attacks. The door of summoning he had just opened had been dissolved by the full might of the vision of white sun rays. This wasn't because the Rose School of Thought's angel, who had been summoned, was unable to resist the Grade 1 sealed artifact, but that the door of summoning couldn't withstand such a special attack. In addition, the King of Curses, Baranka, had only extended 2 hands out. This limited the amount of power that could remotely be projected via his descent. The evil aura that permeated into the real world had also been purified by the vision of white, preventing it from affecting Sharon and Imlin. At that moment, without the door of summoning, Baranka could only retreat to where he was originally. He had to wait for the next summoning or for Shaman King Klarman to pray. As an angel, he had the status required to respond to prayers throughout the world. When that strand of hair fell, Sharon, in her Klarman puppet state, didn't hesitate. Her right hand naturally slid down from her forehead. She grabbed the exaggerated crack that had the full blood moon embedded there and forcefully pressed it down. Klarman couldn't help but let out a blood-curdling scream. The flesh on his forehead turned into a bizarre blur as they filled up the terrifying crack, blocking the miniature, full moon. This was one of the beyonder powers of a Sequence 4 puppet of the mutant pathway, called the Source of Curses. Apart from being able to influence non-living creatures, puppets could also turn into mystical puppets and magical paper figurines. Through the connections established, they could use various methods to curse their targets. This beyonder power would undergo a qualitative change when they reached Sequence 3. At the current stage, it resulted in mutually destructive damage. Under normal circumstances, puppet demigods rarely used it. In other words, a puppet had to hurt themselves to hurt their enemy. The reason why Sharon dared to do so was because she was certain that since both she and her target were at Sequence 4, as a wraith and zombie, she would definitely be able to withstand the damage better than a vampire. After knowing in advance that Shaman King Klarman had a Grade 1 sealed artifact, General of the Pupil-less Eye, Sharon had never thought of truly succeeding with Wraith's possession. Her main goal was to use this method to establish a connection with Klarman to prepare for the subsequent curse. The tuft of hair she plucked symbolized the official start of the curse. Destroying the target's full blood moon on his forehead was to prevent him from establishing the door of summoning once again, which would lead to pulling a Rose School of Thought's angel into the battlefield. Of course, as a demigod, Klarman wasn't going to die so easily from a curse. In the past, he would be able to use moonlight transformation and illusory bats to weaken the damage brought by the curse. Then, via constantly moving at high speeds, he could avoid attacks while chanting the honorific name of a Rose School of Thought's angel. However, under the silvery white moon's illumination, his body seemed to freeze, preventing him from completing the series of actions. While Klarman's mind raced, the general of the pupil-less eye puppet on his shoulder stood up and let out an ear-piercing scream. The glass windows around them shattered, transforming into bullets that shot towards the floating Sharon. Without anyone controlling the eyeball-like glass sphere, it flew up on its own, causing a gigantic pillar of light that had flames swirling around it to descend. The pillar of light enveloped Sharon, causing the surroundings to turn bright as though it was daytime. The general of the pupilless eye could influence ownerless mystical items, allowing them to help it. Amidst the flaring sun, Sharon, who had transformed into Klarman, showed clear signs of melting as her face contorted uncontrollably. Half the large number of glass fragments melted into the pillar of light, while the other half pierced through her body. Klarman once again let out a tragic cry. It made Imlin's body turn cold as his blood seemed to frost up. One bloody hole after another appeared on the Shaman King's body. He was like a candle that had been thrown into a furnace as he slowly softened and the oils from his fats dripped. Any damage from Source of Curses would be reflected onto the target. As a demigod of the Rose school of thought, there was no doubt that Klarman knew of this. His action just now was to use this exchange of damage to force Sharon to stop the curse. The theurgical spells of the Sun domain clearly dealt more damage to evil creatures that were the likes of puppets, wraiths, zombies, and werewolves than vampires, potions professor, scarlet scholar, and shaman kings. That was to say, the continuous flaring sun strikes caused Sharon to dissipate, but it would only be able to severely injure Klarman. As for the demigods of the moon pathway, they had extremely strong self-recovery abilities. In just a second, Shaman King Klarman used his rich experience and deep knowledge of mysticism to accurately grasp the problem of the source of curses, and chose the most suitable method to see results in the shortest time possible. However, at that moment, having lost the vision of White, Imlin White, who had summoned the strange moon, regained his senses. He took out a bronze-green hard-covered notebook and flipped it to one of the pages. A crackling sound could be heard as bolts of lightning appeared out of thin air, interweaving into a storm that emitted a strong, destructive aura. Instantly, the Shaman King Klarman was swept in. Leymano's Travels, Thunderstorm. Having temporarily lost moonlight transformation and the ability to blink within a certain range, Klarman was unable to dodge the attack. He was smote by bolts of silver lightning. Sharon took the opportunity to dispel Source of Curses, to prevent the damage dealt to the target from being reflected onto her. However, her face was clearly much paler than before, and her breathing became weaker. The pillar of light from blazing sun had indeed caused quite a significant amount of damage to her. The silvery white blob that blasted quickly extinguished, and Klarman's body was already pitch black. His charred skin and flesh were constantly peeling off. Pieces of flesh were squirming and growing. The general of the pupilless eye's body rapidly turned incorporeal, as though it had turned into a specter. It was prepared to possess Klarman and move him away from the area to prevent any subsequent blows. At this moment, a blonde, red-eyed head suddenly appeared and bit the head of the exquisite doll. Klarman, who remained groggy, subconsciously looked over and saw a headless lady. This lady was wearing a dark and complicated Gothic long dress and holding 4 blonde, red-eyed heads. Rionette Tynker. In that vast desert, the eyes of Rionette Tynker, who was attacking Abomination Sua with Azek, Ariana, and the giant silver serpent, suddenly glazed over. Her actions turned stiff as she attacked purely on instinct. This was part of Klein's plan. When the battle on the side had stabilized, with Abomination Sua was unable to extricate himself from it within a short period of time, Rionette Tynker's main body would dispel its concealed state. She would then return to the real world and quickly help Sharon and Imlin finish the battle. Looking at the tragic-looking mummy projection in midair, as Klein controlled the 3 angels to hold back Abomination Sua, he used their auras to influence the environment around him. He switched from teleportation to flaming jump, and he continued to deal with the Rose School of Thought's Shaman King. During this process, he appeared carefree and relaxed, but in fact, he realized that the affinity between his body and his soul was decreasing bit by bit. His body was gradually becoming a spirit cage, causing his actions to become stiffer and heavier. This reminded him of the core description of prisoner. The body was the cage of the heart, and the world was the cage of the body. As time passed, he understood the meaning of this sentence from another angle. After Abomination Sua began to direct his attention at him, even if he didn't have the chance to attack him directly, he was still able to make him suffer some form of corrosion. After one of Rionet Tynker's heads was in control of General of the pupil-less eye, another head raised the black staff that it was biting down on with its teeth. The gem-embedded staff lit up with a misty glow. A figure quickly took shape. It was none other than Jayaman Sparrow, who was wearing a top hat and a trench coat while holding Death Knell. Bang! A silver-black stream of light flew out and accurately hit Klarman's body. Klarman's thoughts came to a halt as he froze on the spot. Control Spirit Bullet. This was the Control Spirit Bullet shot by Jayaman Sparrow that the Staff of the Stars had reenacted. This 062 sealed artifact could allow the Beyonder powers and people that surfaced in the minds of the wielder to descend upon reality, while the latter could launch a single attack. On the other side, Sharon immediately turned into a puppet that looked identical to Klarman. She retracted her right hand and ruthlessly stabbed it into her chest. Blood sprayed out as Klarman gaped his mouth, unable to make a sound. To a wraith, the heart definitely wasn't a vital point, but to a vampire, it was lethal. Without giving Klarman any chance to resist, Emlyn flipped through Leymano's travels once again and released the recording of historical void summoning, and took out the bronze unshadowed crucifix. His fingers pressed down on a spike, allowing blood to flow out to cleanse the mottled cross. A pure, burning white spear instantly condensed. After Sharon removed Source of Curses, Emlyn threw out the long spear of light and watched it pierce through Shaman King Klarman's chest, pinning him to the high walls of the cathedral. Bright light suddenly expanded and completely extinguished Klarman's last breath. Unshadowed spear. In the vast desert, Klein suddenly stopped, and while facing Abomination Sua and the Shaman King, he took off his hat, pressed his hand to his chest, and bowed. His body faded and disappeared. During this process, Klein wasn't worried about being disturbed at all. This was because it wasn't that he was attempting to leave, but that Rionet Tynker had dispelled the historical void projection. This also meant that the operation at the other battlefield had succeeded.